be quite attractive, I supposed. Because, as you stated, sir, the throat was slashed from left to right. Considering most people are in fact right-handed, one would imagine from the downward trajectory you described, and the statistical probability our perpetrator was indeed right-handed, the easiest way to commit this act would be from behind the victim. Thomas grabbed the student sitting beside him and wrestled him to a standing position, demonstrating his point. Chair limbs screeched against the tiled flooring as the boy struggled to break free, but Thomas held tight, as if he were a boa constrictor with its prey. He probably placed his left arm across her chest or torso, dragged her close like so. He whipped our classmate around, and swiftly dragged the blade across her throat. Once while standing, then twice as she fell to the ground, all before she knew what was happening. After simulating the near beheading, Thomas dropped the boy and stepped over him, returning to both his seat and his former disinterest. If you were to investigate blood splatter at a slaughterhouse, I'm sure you'd find something like an inverse pattern, as livestock are typically killed while dangling upside down. Ha! Uncle clapped his hands with echoing force. I jumped at his outburst, relieved most of the class jolted in their wooden seats along with me. There was no denying Uncle was passionate about murder. Then why, naysayers cry, didn't blood splatter all over the upper portion of the fence? Uncle challenged, pounding a fist in his palm. When her jugular was severed, it should have rhythmically sprayed everything. Thomas nodded as if he'd been anticipating this very question. That's quite simple to explain, isn't it? She was wearing a neckerchief when first attacked, then it fell away. Or perhaps the murderer ripped it from her to clean his blade? He might possess some neurosis or other. Silence hung thick as the East End fog, as the vivid image Thomas created took life inside each of our minds. Uncle taught me the importance of removing my emotions from these types of cases, but it was hard to speak of a woman as if she were an animal being brought to the slaughterhouse, no matter how far she'd fallen from polite society. I swallowed hard. Thomas had a disturbing way of both predicting why the murderer acted as he did, and turning emotions off when it suited him, it seemed. It took a few seconds for my uncle to respond, but when he did, he was grinning like a madman, his eyes two sparks of fire set ablaze in his skull. I couldn't stop a twinge of jealousy from twisting in my gut. I couldn't tell if I was upset Uncle looked so pleased and I wasn't responsible, or if I wished to be interacting with the annoying boy myself. Out of everyone in this classroom, he at least wasn't cowed by the violence of this crime. Being afraid wouldn't find justice for the family. This boy seemed to understand that. I shook my thoughts free and listened to the lesson. Brilliant deduction skills, Thomas. I, too, believe our victim was attacked from behind while standing. The knife used was most likely between 6 and 8 inches long. Uncle paused, showing the class about how big the blade was with his hands. Uneasiness crept into my blood. It would have been around the same size as the scalpel I'd used last night. Uncle cleared his throat. Judging from the jagged cut in the abdomen, I'd say the wound was inflicted post-mortem, where the body was discovered. I'd also venture our murderer was interrupted and didn't get what he was originally after. But I've an inkling he might be either left-handed or ambidextrous based on other evidence. A boy sitting in the first row raised a shaking hand. What do you mean, what he was originally after? Pray we don't find out. Uncle twisted the corner of his pale moustache, a habit he often indulged while lost in thought. I knew whatever he'd say next wouldn't be pleasant. Without realizing it, I'd grabbed the edges of my own seat so hard my knuckles were turning white. I loosened my grip slightly. For the sake of this lesson, I'll divulge my theories. Uncle glanced around the room once more. I believe he was after her organs. Detective inspectors, however, do not share my sentiments on that aspect. I can only hope they're right. While discussions broke out on Uncle's organ removal theory, I sketched the anatomical figures he'd hastily drawn on the chalkboard at the start of our lesson.